In this group, we are going to talk about how to write an equation from 2 points using a formula. A formula is just a set way to do things that should work out for you every time as long as you're following all of the correct steps. Remember to pause the video anytime you need to. So the points we're going to use for this are 5, 8, and 7, 16. We want to always start by labeling our x's and our y's, and remembering that x comes first and y comes second. Okay. When we use this formula, we are looking for our change in y, remember we write that with the triangle, over our change in x. So how are we changing from 8 to 16, and how are we changing from 5 to 7? Okay, so I know that from 8 to 16, I'm changing by 8. And from 5 to 7, I am changing by 2. So that leaves my slope. Sorry, I should have labeled that first. That leaves my slope as 8 over 2, which I know is the same as 4 over 1, because I divide both parts by 2. And that is also the same as a plain old 4. Now that we know our slope, in order to find our y-intercept, we are going to take our slope and one set of points. It doesn't matter if we choose the first set of points or the second set of points, but we need to choose one set of points and then our slope in order to find the y-intercept. So I'm just going to choose this set just because it's written first. So we're going to start by writing out our equation, y equals mx plus b. I'm going to be changing the m, the x, and the y. I don't know what b is, so b has to stay the letter b. So I'm going to replace the x and the y and the slope with what I know. So I know that the slope is 4, and that's going to be multiplied by whatever my x is, which is why it was really important up here to label our values. So my x is 5, and my y in this set, don't switch sets, make sure you stay in the same set, my y is 8. Now I'm going to just solve this equation to find out what my b is. So when I solve this, I follow my order of operations, I simplify everything on one side, and I simplify everything on the other. 8 is already alone, so there's nothing to do there. Here, I need to multiply 4 times 5, and I get 20. So on this side, I have my 8, and on this side, I have 20 plus b. So I need to either work it out in my head, what would 8 be equal to 20 plus something, or I undo the math and I move this positive 20 over to this side by taking away 20. When I take 20 away from 20, I get left with nothing. To keep this balanced, because this is an equal sign, so it's a scale, to keep it balanced, I need to take 20 away from over here. And 8 minus 20 leaves me with a negative 12 is equal to b. So essentially I'm saying and hoping that my y-intercept is negative 12. How do I know if that's true or not? I need to check it by plugging in the other set of points into the equation now with my slope and my y-intercept and just doing the math to make sure they are all the same. So over here, I'm going to check it. I'm going to again start by writing y equals mx plus b. Here though, now I know my y is 16. My m is still 4. That's not going to change. That's going to be multiplied by my x, which is 7. And I'm going to add my y-intercept, which is negative 12. You could write that there as a plus negative 12, or you could write it just as a minus 12, whatever you would prefer. So now again, I'm just going to do all the math. 16 is already left here by itself, so there's nothing to do. Over here, I follow my order of operations, and I multiply first. So 4 times 7 gives me 28. I'm going to rewrite what I have. So now I'm hoping that 16 is equal to 28 plus a negative 12. And I know that 28 plus a negative 12, so or 28 minus 12, I'll write that over here, this is also 28 minus 12, does indeed give me a 16, and that is how I know I have done all of the math correctly. The numbers don't always work out that we get to do them in these nice, pretty whole numbers. So the next example that we look at is going to give us a fraction that we need to work with. Nothing changes except that we're working with a fraction. So let's look at that one now. Okay, so the points we're going to work on for this one are going to be 4, 12, and 8, 9. Again, label with our x's and our y's. So x and x as our first values in each, y and y. We are trying again to find our change in y over our change in x, and this will give us our slope. It is also our rise over our run, but when we're using just the numbers, it's a little bit easier to talk about it as the change in y over the change in x. So we need to look at how the y's change. I went from 12 to 9. I went from a bigger number to a smaller number, which means I have to have a negative there. So I have to show that I subtracted 3. So I know now my slope is going to be a negative because I went down by 3. Okay. Here, I went from 4 to 8. That's still a positive. I went up by 4, so I'm going to have a positive down here, which means my overall slope is going to be a negative 3/4. I can simplify that as writing it as a negative 75 hundredths in a decimal form, or I can leave it as a negative 3/4. I prefer to work in fractions, but if you prefer to work in decimals, that's fine. The only thing that changes is you're multiplying by those numbers, I'm multiplying by these numbers. So that's our slope. Now to find our y-intercept, we're going to write out our equation, y equals mx plus b, and we're going to replace all of the letters that we know. So again, we want to choose a set of points. I'm just going to choose the first one. And so I know that my y is 12. My m, I know, is a negative 3/4. I'm going to put that in parentheses because it's a fraction and I want it to be able to multiply it. You can leave it out, just make sure you put in a multiplication symbol in between. And my x is 4. And because I am multiplying by a fraction, I'm just going to throw that over 1 already. So I have 4 over 1, because that's how we write a whole number as a fraction, plus b. Okay, so I need to do this math. I'm going to do it over to the side here. So I have negative 3/4 times 4 over 1. To multiply fractions, I just multiply straight across. I don't need to worry about finding common denominators or anything like that. So negative 3 times 4 makes negative 12. 4 times 1 makes 4. I know that negative 12 divided by 4 leaves me with a negative 3. Or negative 3 over 1 if I divide by 4 here and divide by 4 here, which would then leave me with negative 3. So I'm going to come back over here and I have 12 equals negative 3 plus b. I need to get the b all alone, and so I need to do the opposite of what this says. I'm going to add 3 to this side, and I clear that. And I'm going to add 3 to this side, and I get left with 15 is equal to b. I have to check that, so I'm going to check by writing out the equation again, y equals mx plus b. I know this is what I want my b to be, so I'm going to go ahead and replace that now. Throw my equal sign in there too. And now I need to use the second set of points. We switch the points in case we made an error on the first one. Then we know that we made an error by switching the points to the second one. So my y is 9. My x is 8. And my slope is 3/4, negative 3/4. And I'm going to multiply that by the 8, or 8 over 1. So I'm going to do that math first. and I get negative 3/4 times 8 over 1. And I know negative 3 times 8 makes negative 24. 4 times 1 makes 4. If I divide both of these by 4, I get a negative 6 over 1, which is the same as negative 6. So I know now I have 9 equals negative 6 plus 15. And I need to simplify on this side. And I get 9 is equal to negative 6 plus 15. If I add negative 6 plus 15, or I do 15 minus 6, I know that I get 9. And 9 indeed does equal 9. So using the formula is going to work every time. We just have to remember the steps, and we have to be really good and pay really close attention to all of our basic facts and our basic skills. If we don't pay attention to negative numbers, we can mess up the whole entire problem. If we don't work with our fractions correctly, we can mess up that whole entire problem. So what I would like your group to do now is to try the next problem that I'm going to give you. And when you're finished, come show it to me so we can move on to the next group. So your next set of points that you need to work on, please, is 1/6 and 3/12. If you have questions, please let me know.